The old transport ship groaned as it docked at New Terran Station. Black smoke poured from its damaged engines, and sparks flew from broken control panels. Inside the cramped passenger bay, dozens of refugees pressed together, their faces tired and hopeful at the same time. Among them sat a figure wrapped in torn blue fabric. Her skin had a strange, pale blue tint that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. Silver patterns ran across her arms and face, shifting and changing like living tattoos. This was Princess Zera of the Celestial Empire, though nobody on this ship knew her real identity. 3 days ago, she had been living in a crystal palace that touched the clouds. She had servants, gardens full of singing flowers, and enough food to feed a small planet. Now she owned nothing except the clothes on her back and a small crystal pendant. Hanging around her neck, the pendant was all that remained of her family's power, and even that was starting to fade. The Civil War had come fast and brutal. Her uncle, Commander Vex, had turned the military against the royal family. One by one, her relatives had disappeared in the night. Palace guards who had protected her since childhood suddenly became her enemies. The only reason she escaped was because her loyal servant, old Keeper Fen, had hidden her in a supply ship just hours before the palace fell. As the transport ship's doors opened, Zera pulled her hood lower over her face. The other refugees pushed past her, eager to start their new lives. She stayed in her seat, afraid to move. What was she supposed to do now? She had never bought food, never looked for work, never even walked without someone clearing the path ahead of her. The ship's captain, a gruff man with oil-stained hands, shook her shoulder. End of the line, lady, everyone out. Zera stumbled down the metal ramp into the station's main corridor. The air smelled of engine fuel and recycled oxygen. Workers in dirty coveralls hurried past, carrying tools and equipment. Children ran between the adults, laughing and playing games. It was so different from the quiet, formal halls of her palace. Her stomach growled loudly. She had not eaten since yesterday, and before that, only small scraps she had found in the transport's kitchen. The other refugees seemed to know where to go, following signs towards something called the processing center. But Zera was too proud to stand in line with her hand out, begging for charity. She wandered through the station's levels, going deeper and deeper underground. The corridors became narrower and darker. Pipes ran along the walls, carrying water and air to the levels above. Steam hissed from loose joints, and the floor vibrated with the rhythm of massive engines. In a small alcove between two large pipes, Zera found a place to sit. She pulled out her crystal pendant and held it up to the dim light. The crystal had been bright purple when she left home, pulsing with the life force of her family line. Now, it was barely glowing, more gray than purple. Each day it grew dimmer, just like her hope. She remembered her grandmother's words. The royal crystal reflects the strength of our bloodline. Dear one, as long as it shines, the rightful rulers live. If the crystal was fading, did that mean she was the last one left? Were all her cousins, aunts, and uncles really gone? Tears rolled down her cheeks, making the silver patterns on her face shimmer. She had been taught that princesses never cry in public, but there was nobody here to see her shame. For 3 days, she had been hiding in these tunnels, drinking water from the pipes and trying to make her crystal glow brighter through sheer willpower. On the second day, she had tried to trade the pendant for food at one of the station's markets. The first merchant had laughed at her, saying pretty rocks were worthless. The second had offered her a moldy piece of bread for it, clearly trying to cheat her. The third had called security, claiming she was probably a thief. Now, on her third day, hunger was winning the battle against pride. She had to find food soon, or she would collapse. With shaking hands, she wrapped the pendant back in her torn robes and stood up. Maybe she could find work somewhere. How hard could it be? The market level was busy with afternoon shoppers. Zera approached a food stall where a kind-looking woman was selling fresh vegetables. The smell of cooked meat made her mouth water and her stomach cramp with hunger. Please, she said, her voice hoarse from thirst. I need food. I can work for it. The woman looked her up and down, taking in the torn royal robes and the strange blue skin. "Sorry, honey, I don't hire aliens. Too much paperwork." Zara tried 3 more stalls with the same result. Some people were polite about it. Others were rude, but nobody would give her a chance. She was starting to understand that being different made everything harder. As she walked away from the last stall, feeling defeated, 3 large men stepped out from behind a cargo container. They wore dirty clothes and had mean looks in their eyes. The leader, a man with a scared face and missing teeth, smiled at her in a way that made her skin crawl. Well, what do we have here?" he said, blocking her path. "A lost little alien princess." Zara's heart jumped. Did they know who she really was? "I am no princess," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The man laughed. "Course you're not, but you got something shiny under them rags, don't you? We saw you showing it round the market." The other 2 men spread out, surrounding her. Zara looked around desperately for help, but the few people nearby were pretending not to notice. This was clearly a rough part of the station where people minded their own business. "Hand it over, and we won't hurt you," the leader said, stepping closer. "Pretty thing like you shouldn't be walking around alone anyway." Zara clutched the pendant to her chest. It was the last piece of her family, her identity, her hope. "No, I will not give it to you." The men laughed. "Feisty one, isn't she? Maybe we should teach her some manners." Just as the leader reached for her, a new voice cut through the air. "Hey, what's going on here?" A human man walked up to them, carrying a toolbox in one hand and a work tablet in the other. He was not particularly tall or muscular, but something about the way he moved made the 3 thugs step back slightly. His coveralls were clean but worn, and his hands were stained with honest work. "Nothing that concerns you, Jake," the leader said, but his voice was less confident now. Jake set down his toolbox and crossed his arms. "Funny thing about that, Tommy, when I see 3 grown men cornering one scared woman, it becomes my concern real quick. She's got something valuable," Tommy said. "We're just asking her to share." "Asking?" Jake looked at Zara, who was pressed against the wall with tears in her eyes. "Doesn't look like asking to me." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The other 2 thugs were looking nervous. Shifting from foot to foot, Tommy's face was getting red with anger. "Walk away, Jake. This isn't your fight." Jake picked up his toolbox again, but instead of leaving, he moved to stand next to Zara. "Actually, it is now. See, this lady is clearly new here and where I come from. We help newcomers instead of robbing them." For a moment, it looked like Tommy might try to fight anyway, but then footsteps echoed down the corridor, and a group of station security guards came into view. Tommy cursed under his breath and motioned to his friends. "This isn't over," he said to Jake, then turned to Zara. "You better find some protection, alien girl. We'll be watching." The 3 men melted back into the shadows between the cargo containers. Jake waited until they were completely gone before turning to Zara. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle now. Zara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She had been so close to losing everything, and this stranger had saved her without asking for anything in return. "You look like you haven't eaten in days," Jake said, studying her face. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" I do not remember," Zara admitted. Jake's expression softened even more. "Come on. There's a decent place to eat on level 7. My treat." Zara hesitated. She had been taught never to accept charity, that it was beneath her station. But her station was gone, and she was just a hungry refugee now. "I have no money to repay you," she said. Jake shrugged. "Did I ask for repayment? Sometimes people help each other just because it's the right thing to do." 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a small restaurant that served simple but good food. Zara tried to eat slowly and maintain her dignity, but the soup was the best thing she had tasted in days. Jake watched her with concern, occasionally pushing the bread basket closer to her. "So," he said after she had finished most of her meal, "I'm Jake Rivers. I keep the life support systems running on this station. And you are?" Zara paused with the spoon halfway to her mouth. She could not tell him her real name. I am Zara. Just Zara. Nice to meet you, Zara. Where are you from? The Celestial Empire. Though I suppose it does not exist anymore. Jake nodded sadly. Yeah, we heard about the Civil War. Bad business. A lot of refugees have been coming through here lately. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Zara finished her soup and felt more human than she had in days. This Jake person seemed kind, but she wondered what he wanted from her. In her experience, kindness always came with a price. Why did you help me? She asked finally. Jake looked surprised by the question. Why wouldn't I? You were in trouble. But I am an alien, a stranger. I have nothing to offer you. So, Jake leaned back in his chair. I've been where you are. Maybe not exactly, but close. The next morning, Zara stood outside the hydroponics bay holding a small bag with her few belongings. Her stomach was full for the first time in days, thanks to Jake's kindness. But her pride was still wounded, a princess of the Celestial Empire, reduced to begging for manual labor jobs. How had her life changed so completely in just a few days? Jake appeared beside her, carrying his usual toolbox. Ready for your first day? Zara nodded, though she felt anything but ready. What if they do not want me? Maria Santos is fair. Jake said, she judges people by their work, not their background. Just be honest about what you can do. They walked into the growing facility together. The air was warm and humid, filled with the smell of rich soil and growing plants. Rows of vegetables stretched as far as the eye could see. Growing in carefully controlled environments, workers moved between the plants, checking growth rates and adjusting nutrient systems. Maria Santos was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and calloused hands. She looked up from her tablet when Jake brought Zara over. This is Zara, Jake said. The one I told you about. She has engineering experience with environmental systems. Maria studied Zara carefully. You ever work with plants before? I manage Palace Gardens back home, Zara said, trying to sound confident. Palace Gardens, huh? Maria raised an eyebrow. This is not palace work. Here, you get your hands dirty. You work long hours, and everyone pulls their weight. No exceptions. Zara straightened her shoulders. I'm willing to work. Maria looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. All right, trial period. 1 week. If you work out, you stay. If not, you go. Fair enough, fair enough. Zara agreed. Jake squeezed her shoulder. You got this. I'll check on you later. As Jake left, Maria handed Zara a pair of work gloves and a small toolkit. Your first job is weeding section C7. Follow me. The next few hours were the hardest of Zara's life. Her hands, which had never done anything rougher than writing with a crystal stylus, were soon covered in dirt and developing blisters. Her back ached from bending over plants. Her knees hurt from kneeling on the middle floor gratings. The other workers watched her with curiosity and skepticism. She heard whispers as she passed. Princess thinks she can do real work. One man muttered. Give her a day, another woman said. She'll be crying and running back to wherever she came from. Zara gritted her teeth and kept working. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fail. But by lunchtime, her elegant posture had crumbled. She sat in the break room, staring at her raw, bleeding hands. Rough first day? Asked a voice behind her. Zara turned to see a young human woman about her own age. She had short brown hair and a friendly smile, and her work clothes were just as dirty as everyone else's. I am fine, Zara said, though her voice shook slightly. I'm Beth, the woman said, sitting down across from her. Been working here about 2 years. Started the same way you did, hands like hamburger meat after day 1. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small jar of healing salve. This will help. Made it myself from some of the medicinal plants we grow here. Zara hesitated. She had been taught not to accept charity, but her hands were throbbing with pain. Thank you, she said quietly. As Beth helped her apply the salve, she said, don't let the others get to you. They're good people, but they're protective of this place. Too many folks come through here thinking farm work is easy, then quit when they realize it's not. I will not quit, Zara said firmly. Beth smiled. Good. We need people who stick around. Jake says you know about environmental systems. Yes. Climate control, atmospheric management, water purification. That's great. Our environmental controls have been acting up lately. Maybe you can take a look once you get settled in. That afternoon, Zara worked in the plant nutrition section. The systems were similar to the ones she had studied in the palace, but simpler and more practical. She found herself genuinely interested in how everything worked together to create perfect growing conditions. When she noticed that one of the nutrient pumps was running inefficiently, she mentioned it to the section supervisor, an older man named Pete. What do you mean, inefficient? Pete asked. Zara pointed to the flow readings. The pump is working too hard. See how the pressure levels fluctuate? There's probably a partial blockage in the line. Pete frowned at the readings. Huh. You might be right. Been wondering why our power costs went up this month. They traced the nutrient lines together and found exactly what Zara had predicted, a filter that was clogged with mineral deposits. When they cleaned it, the system immediately ran smoother. Well, Pete said, looking at her with new respect. You really do know your stuff. Word spread quickly through the facility. By the end of the day, several workers had come to ask Zara's opinion on various technical issues. She found herself enjoying the problem solving, even though her body ached from the physical labor. That evening, Jake found her in the small dormitory room Maria had assigned her. It was tiny compared to her palace chambers, but it was clean and private. How was your first day? He asked. Painful, Zara admitted, showing him her bandaged hands. But interesting. I learned things I never knew about practical agriculture. Jake sat down on the small chair beside her bed. You know, when I first came here, I thought I knew everything about engineering. Turns out, book learning and real-world experience are two different things. What do you mean? I mean, in school they teach you perfect theoretical solutions. Out here, you learn to fix things with spare parts and creative thinking. You learn that sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. Zara nodded slowly. In the palace, if something broke, servants would replace it with a new one. I never had to think about making do with what we had. That's survival out here, Jake said. Making the best of what you got. Over the next few days, Zara threw herself into learning everything she could. She worked in different sections of the facility, understanding how each part contributed to the whole system. Her hands grew calloused and her back grew stronger. More importantly, she began to understand the rhythm of honest work. The other workers slowly began to accept her. When she worked late without complaining, they started including her in conversations. When she shared her technical knowledge to help solve problems, they began asking for her advice. But it was not all smooth sailing. On her fourth day, she made a mistake that cost the facility several hours of lost production. She had adjusted some settings on an environmental control system without asking permission first, and the change had caused problems in 3 different growing sections. Maria called her into the office. What happened out there? Zara felt her cheeks burn with shame. I thought I could improve the efficiency. I did not realize it would affect other systems. That's not how we do things here, Maria said firmly. We're a team. You don't make changes without talking to people first. I apologize. In the palace, I was used to making decisions alone. Maria's expression softened slightly. Look, I can see you're trying, and you do have good technical knowledge. But you need to learn that being smart is not the same as being wise. Wisdom comes from understanding how your actions affect others. That evening, Zara sat alone in her room, feeling more homesick than ever. She pulled out her crystal pendant and held it up to the light. It was definitely dimmer than when she had arrived at the station. The purple glow was fading to a dull gray. She thought about her grandmother's words again. The royal crystal reflects the strength of our bloodline, dear one. If the crystal was dying, did that mean she was dying too? Not physically, but as a person. Was she losing who she was by working with her hands and taking orders from others? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. Beth entered with a cup of tea. You looked pretty down at dinner. Thought you might want to talk. Zara accepted the tea gratefully. Do you ever wonder if you were meant for something else? Beth laughed. Every day. I used to be a school teacher on Earth. Never thought I'd end up growing vegetables in space. What happened? Budget cuts, school closed. I needed work, so I came out here. Beth shrugged. Turns out I'm good at helping things grow, whether they're children or plants. Do you miss teaching? Sometimes. But I found something here I never had before. Purpose. Every plant I help grow feeds someone. Every system I help maintain keeps people alive. That matters. Zara stared into her tea. I used to think my purpose was to rule, to make decisions for others, and live up to my family's legacy. Maybe your purpose is different now, Beth suggested. Maybe it's about helping in a new way. That night, Zara dreamed of her pal's gardens. But instead of servants tending the plants, she saw herself working alongside them, her hands dirty but her heart full. When she woke up, she realized something had changed inside her. The next morning, she approached Pete in the nutrition section. I wanted to apologize again for yesterday. I should have asked before making changes. Pete nodded, apology accepted. But I got a question for you. We've been having trouble with the pH balance in section D. Want to take a look? With supervision this time. Zara spent the morning working with Pete to diagnose the problem. It turned out to be a complex issue involving multiple systems, and solving it required both her theoretical knowledge and Pete's practical experience. 3 months had passed since Zara's first day in the hydroponics bay. Her hands were no longer soft and pale, but strong and capable. The silver patterns on her skin seemed brighter now, shifting more actively when she was happy or excited. She had found her rhythm in this new life, but more importantly, she had found something she never expected: belonging. Every morning, she would wake up early and check the environmental readings before anyone else arrived. It had become her routine, her way of contributing something extra to the team. Today was different, though. As she walked through the facility, she noticed something wrong with the air circulation system. The plants in Section A were drooping slightly, and the humidity readings were off. She frowned and traced the air ducts with her eyes, following them up to the main ventilation shaft. There was definitely a problem somewhere in the system. Morning, Zara. Jake called out as he entered the bay with his toolbox. Over the past few months, they had developed an easy friendship. He would often stop by during his rounds to chat about technical problems or just life in general. Jake, I think we have a problem with the main air system, she said, pointing to the drooping plants. Jake looked around and immediately saw what she meant. Yeah, you're right. The airflow is definitely reduced. Could be a blockage in the main shaft. They walked to the central control room where Maria was already reviewing the morning reports. When they explained the situation, her face grew serious. If the air system fails completely, we could lose half our crops, she said. How long do you think we have? Jake checked his readings. Hard to say. Maybe 6 hours before it becomes critical. The problem is, the main shaft is too narrow for most people to crawl through. We need someone small and technically skilled to get in there and fix it. All three of them looked at Zara. She was by far the smallest person on the technical team, and her knowledge of environmental systems made her the obvious choice. I can do it, she said without hesitation. It's dangerous, Maria warned. If something goes wrong in there, we might not be able to get you out quickly. Zara smiled. 3 months ago, I was afraid to get my hands dirty. Now you want me to crawl through air ducts to save our crops. I think I can handle it. An hour later, Zara was suited up in protective gear, carrying a small toolkit and a portable communication device. The entrance to the main air shaft was barely wide enough for her shoulders. Jake had rigged up a safety line that would allow them to pull her out if needed. Remember, Jake said, follow the main duct until you reach the central junction. That's where the blockage is most likely to be. Zara nodded and squeezed into the shaft. The space was cramped and dark, lit only by the small lamp on her helmet. She could hear the station's machinery humming around her and feel the vibration of the engines through the metal walls. As she crawled deeper into the system, she thought about how much her life had changed. A few months ago, The idea of crawling through dirty air ducts would have horrified her. Now, it felt like an adventure. She was doing something important, something that mattered to people she cared about. The communication device crackled. "How are you doing in there?" Jake's voice asked. "Fine so far," she replied. "I can see the junction ahead. There's definitely something blocking the main intake." When she reached the central junction, she found the problem. A large piece of debris, probably from some construction work, had gotten wedged in the air. Intake, it was blocking about 60% of the airflow. "Found it," she reported. "It's a piece of metal plating. I think I can remove it, but I'll need to disconnect some of the intake sensors first. Be careful." Maria's voice came through the communicator. "Those sensors are expensive to replace." Zara worked carefully in the cramped space, using her engineering knowledge to safely disconnect the sensors without damaging them. Then she used a small crowbar from her toolkit to pry the metal plating loose. It came free with a loud clang, and immediately she could feel the airflow improving. "That did it," Jake's voice said excitedly. "Airflow is back to normal." "Great work, Zara." When she emerged from the air shaft an hour later, covered in dust and grime, she found a crowd waiting for her. The entire day shift had gathered to see if she had succeeded. When they saw her smile, they broke into cheers and applause. "You saved our crops," Pete said, clapping her on the shoulder. "That's a month's worth of food for the station." "We all did it," Zara said. "I just happened to be small enough to fit in the shaft." But she felt a warm glow of pride that was entirely new to her. In the palace, people had praised her for her bloodline, her royal bearing, her inherited status. Here, they were praising her for something she had actually accomplished. That evening, there was an impromptu celebration in the facility's break room. Someone had brought out a bottle of real earth wine that had been saved for special occasions. As they shared stories and laughed together, Zara felt more included than she ever had in formal palace ceremonies. "You know," Beth said, sitting beside her, "when you first got here, I wasn't sure you'd last a week. You looked so lost." "I was lost," Zara admitted. "I had no idea who I was supposed to be without my title and my palace. And now," Zara looked around at her co-workers, her friends, and smiled. "Now I know I'm someone who fixes air ducts and grows vegetables, and somehow that feels more important than being a princess." Jake overheard and joined their conversation. "You know what's funny? You're probably the first royal person I've ever met, and you're also one of the most down-to-earth people I know." They all laughed at the unintended joke, but later, when the celebration was winding down, Jake asked Zara to take a walk with him through the quieter levels of the station. "I wanted to talk to you about something," he said as they walked along one of the observation decks. Through the large windows, they could see the stars and the distant glow of the system's sun. "What about your legal status? You've been here 3 months without any official documentation. Sooner or later, that's going to become a problem." Zara's stomach clenched. She had been trying not to think about this issue, hoping it would somehow resolve itself. What kind of problem? Immigration enforcement does random checks on the outer stations. If they find undocumented workers, they can deport them or worse. And with the war in your home system, there might be people looking for survivors of the royal family. "What can I do?" Jake was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars. "There are a few options. You could apply for refugee status, but that takes years and there's no guarantee. You could try to get work sponsorship, but that requires an employer willing to take legal responsibility for you, or you could marry a station citizen. Spouses get automatic residency rights." Zara felt her cheeks grow warm. "Jake, I could not ask you to. I'm not suggesting anything," he said quickly. "I'm just explaining your options. It's something to think about." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Zara found herself stealing glances at Jake as they moved through the dimly lit corridors. Over the past 3 months, she had come to rely on his friendship more than she wanted to admit. He was kind, intelligent, and had a practical way of looking at problems that she found reassuring. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Sure. Why have you been so kind to me? From the very first day, you helped me when you had no reason to." Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. You really want to know? She nodded. Because when I first saw you in that market, scared and alone, you reminded me of myself when I first came here. But also he paused, seeming to struggle with his words. Also because I could see that underneath all that royal training, you were a good person. Someone worth helping. How could you tell? The way you treated the people who were rude to you. You never got angry or demanded special treatment. You just kept trying. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. They had reached the end of the observation deck. In the distance, they could see another transport ship approaching the station, probably carrying more refugees from various conflicts. Across the galaxy, I have been thinking, Zara said softly, about who I used to be and who I am now. And I used to think my value came from my bloodline, from being born special. But these past few months have taught me that real value comes from what you contribute, from how you treat others. Jake smiled. That's very wise. Perhaps, but it also makes me wonder if I am no longer a princess, if I am just Zara who fixes environmental systems and grows vegetables, then what do I have to offer someone like you? The question hung in the air between them. Jake looked at her for a long moment, and she could see something changing in his expression. Zara, he said gently, you're not just anything. You're brilliant, brave, and you've become one of the most respected people on this station. Any man would be lucky to. He stopped himself, shaking his head. Sorry, that's not my place to say. But Zara had heard enough. The warmth in his voice, the way he looked at her, it told her everything she needed to know. The feeling was mutual. Jake, she said, taking a step closer to him, if someone were to propose a marriage of convenience to solve my legal problems, hypothetically speaking, what would you think of that person? 2 weeks had passed since Zara and Jake's conversation on the observation deck. They had been dancing around their feelings, sharing meaningful glances and finding excuses to work together. But neither had been brave enough to bring up that honest conversation they had promised to have. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when the alarm bells started ringing. Zara was checking the nutrient levels in Section B when the emergency alert echoed through the station's corridors. All personnel remain calm. Station security to level 1 immediately. This is not a drill. Her blood turned to ice. Emergency alerts were rare on New Terran Station. The last one had been 2 years ago when a cargo ship had suffered engine failure. Near the docking bay, Jake's voice crackled over the communication system. Zara, are you there? She grabbed her portable communicator. I'm here. What's happening? Imperial ships just dropped out of hyperspace. 3 vessels, military configuration. They're requesting permission to dock. Zara's hands started shaking. The Celestial Empire's military forces, her uncle's forces, had found her. After 4 months of peace and safety, her past had finally caught up with her. Zara? Jake's voice was concerned. You still there? Yes, she whispered. Jake, I need to tell you something. I am not just a refugee. I am Princess Zara of the Third House. Came a new voice over the communicator. Station Administrator Chen had patched into their conversation. We know who you are. We've known for weeks. Zara felt the world spinning around her. You knew? Imperial Intelligence isn't the only group with databases, Administrator Chen said. The question is, what do we do now? They're demanding we turn you over as a fugitive from Imperial justice. Before Zara could respond, Jake's voice cut in. They can't have her. She's under station protection. Actually, Administrator Chen said carefully, that's complicated. She's not officially a station resident. She has no legal documentation. Technically, we have no grounds to refuse an Imperial extradition request. Zara closed her eyes and leaned against the wall. She had always known this day might come, but she had hoped for more time. Time to figure out her feelings, time to build a real life, time to become someone other than a target. How long do I have? She asked. They're demanding immediate transfer. I'm stalling them with docking procedures, but maybe an hour at most, an hour. 60 minutes to say goodbye to the only place she had ever felt truly at home. She ran through the station corridors, not caring who saw her tears. Her first instinct was to pack her few belongings and find a way to escape on another ship. She had done it before. She could do it again. But as she reached her small room, she realized she didn't want to run anymore. She was tired of being afraid, tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of having no place to call home. Jake found her there 20 minutes later, sitting on her bed and staring at her crystal pendant. It had grown dimmer again, as if responding to her despair. "There you are," he said, breathing hard from running. "I've been looking everywhere for you. You should not be here," she said without looking up. "It is dangerous to be associated with me now." Jake sat down beside her on the narrow bed. "Zara, look at me." When she finally met his eyes, she saw determination there, not fear. "I have an idea," he said, "but I need to ask you something first. And I need you to be completely honest with me. What, do you want to stay here? On this station? With these people? Living this life?" Zara thought about the hydroponics bay, about Buz's friendship, about Pete's gruff kindness, about Maria's fair leadership. She thought about crawling through air ducts to save crops, about the satisfaction of honest work, about feeling useful and valued for who she was rather than what she had been born to be. "Yes," she said firmly, "I want to stay." "And do you?" Jake hesitated, then seemed to gather his courage. "Do you think you could be happy married to a simple engineer who keeps life support systems running?" Zara's heart stopped. "Jake, you cannot be serious. You do not understand what you would be risking." "I understand perfectly. I'd be risking my comfortable, boring, lonely life for a chance at something amazing. The Empire will never stop hunting me. My uncle will not rest until every member of the royal bloodline is eliminated. Then we'll face that together. You could be killed, Zara." Jake took her hands in his. "For months ago, you were a princess living in a crystal palace. Now you're the bravest, most capable person I know. You saved our crops. You earned the respect of every person on this station through hard work and kindness. If you can change that much, don't you think I'm brave enough to stand beside you?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. "It would not be a real marriage. It would be a legal arrangement. To protect me, would it?" Jake asked softly. "Because I've been falling in love with you since the day I found you in that market. The way you refuse to give up, the way you learn to work with your hands, the way you care about people. I don't want to marry you just to save you, Zara. I want to marry you because I can't imagine my life without you." The communicator crackled again. "All station personnel. Imperial boarding party will dock in 30 minutes. Princess Zara, please report to docking bay 3. Zara looked into Jake's eyes and saw her future there. Not a future of running and hiding, but a future of belonging and love and partnership. "Jake Rivers," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "will you marry me? Is that a proposal or an acceptance?" He asked with a shaky laugh. "Both." "Then yes, absolutely yes." They ran hand in hand through the station corridors to Administrator Chen's office. He was waiting for them with a marriage registration tablet and a very nervous expression. "This is highly irregular," he said. "Emergency marriages require 2 witnesses and a 12-hour waiting period. We don't have 12 hours, Jake said. "I know." Administrator Chen sighed. "Which is why I've already waived the waiting period under emergency circumstances. Beth and Pete are on their way to serve as witnesses." 10 minutes later, Zara found herself standing in the administrator's office, holding Jake's hands while Beth and Pete stood beside them with huge grins on their faces. "Do you, Jake Rivers, take Zara to be your lawfully wedded wife in good times and bad, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health?" "I do," Jake said, never taking his eyes off her face. "Do you, Zara, take Jake Rivers to be your lawfully wedded husband in good times and bad, for richer or poorer, in sickness and health?" Zara thought about everything she was leaving behind, her title, her bloodline, her royal identity. Then she thought about everything she was gaining: love, partnership, belonging, a future built on choice rather than birth. "I do," she said, "by the authority granted to me by the Frontier Colonies Administration. I pronounce you husband and wife." Jake kissed her then, gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Zara realized that her crystal pendant was glowing brighter than it ever had, pulsing with warm purple light. Maybe her grandmother had been wrong. Maybe the crystal didn't reflect the strength of her bloodline. Maybe it reflected the strength of her heart. 5 minutes later, when the Imperial officers stormed into the office, demanding the fugitive princess, Administrator Chen handed them a tablet with an official marriage certificate. "I'm sorry, officers," he said calmly, "but there is no Princess Zara on this station. Only Zara Rivers, a married station citizen with full legal protection under Frontier Colonies law." The lead officer, a stern woman with cold eyes, studied the certificate carefully. "This marriage is obviously a fraud, arranged to avoid Imperial justice. Can you prove that?" Administrator Chen asked. "Because our records show that Jake Rivers and his wife have been living and working together on this station for months. Their relationship is well documented. It wasn't technically true." But Jake squeezed Zara's hand, and she knew that from this moment forward it would be. The Imperial officers left empty-handed, but not before the lead officer looked directly at Zara and said, "This isn't over. The Emperor has a long memory." When they were gone, Zara collapsed into Jake's arms, overwhelmed by relief and terror and joy all at once. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now," Jake said, holding her close, "we go home. We go back to the hydroponics bay, and we grow vegetables, and we fix air systems, and we build a life together. Just like that, just like that." As they walked through the station corridors toward their new shared quarters, Beth fell into step beside them. "So," she said with a grin, "how does it feel to be married?" Zara looked at Jake, then at the crystal pendant glowing warmly against her chest, then at the people around her who had become her chosen family. "It feels like coming home," she said. 6 months after their emergency wedding, Zara woke up in the small apartment she now shared with Jake. Sunlight from the station's artificial day cycle streamed through their single window, and she could hear the familiar hum of the life support systems that had become the soundtrack of her new life. She rolled over to find Jake already awake, reading reports on his tablet. His hair was messy from sleep, and he had that focused expression he got when solving technical problems. Somehow, even after all these months, seeing him first thing in the morning still made her heart skip a beat. "Good morning, Mrs. Rivers," he said with a grin, using the name that still felt wonderfully strange to her. "Good morning, husband," she replied, stealing a quick kiss before getting up to start their day. Their life had settled into a comfortable routine. Zara still worked in the hydroponics bay, but now she also helped Jake with environmental systems throughout the station. They made a good team. Her theoretical knowledge, combined with his practical experience, meant they could solve problems that neither could handle alone. But today was different. Today, Administrator Chen had called them to his office for a meeting about something he would only describe as an opportunity. As they walked through the station corridors, Zara noticed how much had changed since her arrival. The refugee population had grown significantly, with people fleeing conflicts across the galaxy. Many of them looked at her and Jake with curiosity and hope. Word had spread about the princess who had found love and safety through marriage. To a kind human, they had become symbols of possibility, whatever Chen wants to discuss. Jake said, "We decide together. No more making big choices alone." Zara squeezed his hand, agreed. "We are partners in everything now." Administrator Chen's office was busier than usual. Along with Chen himself, there were 2 people Zara didn't recognize, a middle-aged human woman with official-looking clothes and a young Zephyrian man whose silver markings identified him as someone from her homeworld. "Zara, Jake," Chen said, standing up, "thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet Director Walsh from the Colonial Development Authority and Keeper Finn from the Zephyrian Refugee Council." The introductions were formal, but Zara could sense excitement in the air. Director Walsh had the look of someone with big plans, while Keeper Finn seemed nervous but hopeful. "We have a proposal for you," Director Walsh began. "The Colonial Authority is planning a new settlement project, a joint colony designed specifically for refugees from various worlds. We need experienced leaders who understand both technical systems and cultural integration. Jake raised an eyebrow. What kind of leaders? Colony administrators, Keeperfin said. Speaking for the first time, his accent reminded Zara painfully of home. People who can help different species work together, solve practical problems, and build something new. Director Walsh pulled out a holographic display showing a beautiful planet, with green continents and blue oceans. This is Haven Prime. Perfect climate, rich soil, plenty of water. We want to establish the first truly multicultural colony there. Sarah stared at the image. It looks like, she paused, memories flooding back. It looks like my home world. Before the war. That's not an accident, Keeperfin said gently. We chose it specifically because it could support Zephyrian agricultural techniques. Alongside human technology, the position comes with significant responsibility, Director. Walsh continued. You be overseeing environmental systems for the entire colony, managing resource allocation, and helping resolve conflicts between different cultural groups. Jake looked at Zara, reading the uncertainty in her expression. What's the timeline? The advance team leaves in 3 months. The first colonist ships follow 6 months after that. Can we think about it? Zara asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. As they walked back to their apartment, both were quiet. The offer was exciting, but also overwhelming. Leaving New Terran Station would mean leaving the place where they had fallen in love, where Zara had learned who she really was. What do you think? Jake asked finally. I think I am scared, Zara admitted. This station saved my life. These people became my family. How can I leave that behind? Maybe we're not leaving it behind, Jake said thoughtfully. Maybe we're taking it with us and sharing it with others. That evening, they sat in the hydroponics bay after their shift ended. The plants around them were thriving, creating the peaceful green space that had become their favorite place to talk about important decisions. Beth found them there, as she often did. You two look serious. Everything okay? They explained the colony offer. Beth listened quietly, then surprised them both with her response. I think you should do it. Really? Zara asked. Look, I'll miss you terribly. We all will. But think about what you've accomplished here. You came as a refugee with nothing, and now you're one of the most respected people on the station. Imagine what you could do for thousands of refugees on a new world. Over the next few weeks, more people shared their opinions. Pete thought they were crazy to leave steady jobs for an uncertain adventure. Maria thought it was exactly the kind of challenge they were meant for. The other refugees begged them to go, saying they needed advocates who understood what it was like to lose everything and start over. The decision became clear when they received an unexpected message. It was from a group of Zephyrian refugees who had heard about the colony project. They were asking specifically for Zara and Jake to be involved, saying they trusted them to help preserve Zephyrian culture while building bridges with other species. They need us. Zara said after reading the message. Are you sure? Jake asked. Because once we say yes, there's no going back. We'll be committed to this for years. Zara pulled out her crystal pendant. Over the months, it had grown steadily brighter, but never more so than when she was working to help others. My grandmother used to tell me that royalty means service. I thought that meant ruling over people, but I was wrong. It means serving them. So we're doing this. We are doing this. 3 months later, they stood on the departure platform with a single bag each, just as Zara had arrived at the station almost a year before. But everything else was different. This time, she wasn't alone and afraid. She had a partner, a purpose, and a future full of possibilities. The entire station had turned out to see them off. Maria had tears in her eyes as she hugged them goodbye. Pete gruffly told Jake to keep the alien princess out of trouble. Beth promised to visit as soon as civilian transport was available. Administrator Chen shook both their hands. You know, when those Imperial officers first showed up, I thought we weren't for nothing but trouble. Instead, you'd have shown us all what's possible when people from different worlds work together, as their transport ship prepared to leave. Zara stood at the observation window, watching New Terran Station grow smaller in the distance. Jake stood beside her, his arm around her waist. Any regrets? He asked. Zara thought about everything she had gained and lost over the past year. She had lost her title, her palace, her old identity, but she had gained love, purpose, and the knowledge that she could build something meaningful with her own hands. None, she said firmly. I am exactly where I am supposed to be. The transport ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward their new home. In her cabin that night, Zara held up her crystal pendant one last time. It was glowing so brightly now that it cast purple light on the walls. She thought about her grandmother's words again. The royal crystal reflects the strength of our bloodline. Dear one, maybe her grandmother had been right after all. But maybe bloodline didn't mean what Zara had always thought. Maybe family wasn't just about who you were born to, but about who you chose to love and serve. 6 months later, on the surface of Haven Prime, Zara stood in the middle of the first multicultural agricultural facility in the galaxy. Humans worked alongside Zephyrians, sharing techniques and learning from each other. Former refugees had become farmers, engineers, teachers, and leaders. Jake found her there, as he often did, watching their people build something beautiful together. The hydroponics bay is ahead of schedule, he reported, and the first harvest festival is next week. But transport arrived this morning. She's going to love what we've built here. Zara smiled, watching a group of human and Zephyrian children playing together in the gardens. Do you remember what you told me that first day? About people helping each other because it's the right thing to do. Yeah, I understand now. That is what makes humans special. Not your technology or your strength, but your ability to see strangers as potential family. Jake kissed her forehead, and that's what makes you special too. You learn to see the universe the way we do. As the sun set over Haven Prime, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Zara felt truly at peace for the first time in her life. She was no longer Princess Zara of the Celestial Empire. She was Zara Rivers, colony administrator, wife, and bridge between worlds. And that was exactly who she was meant to be.